Welcome, precious one. As you settle in, allow the soft sound of rain in the background to gently quiet your thoughts. Let this moment become a pause, away from the noise, the pressure, the expectations of the day. You don't need to rush. You don't need to perform. You are safe here. Tonight, we are entering the wisdom of Proverbs, sacred words that have guided hearts for generations. These are not just ancient sayings written long ago. They are living truths from the heart of God. They are offered to steady us when life feels uncertain, and to guide us when the way forward feels unclear. Proverbs teaches us how to walk with understanding, integrity, and peace, not just in theory, but in everyday life. Each verse is like a small light along a dark path, not harsh, not overwhelming, just enough to help you take the next step. Some verses gently correct us, not to shame us, but to realign our hearts. Others comfort us, reminding us that wisdom is not about being perfect. It is about being teachable. So take a breath. Let your shoulders relax. If it helps, close your eyes and listen. Not just with your ears, but with your heart. Ask yourself quietly, what has been weighing on my mind lately? Where do I need clarity, or peace, or direction? You don't need to answer right now. Just be open. And here is something comforting. You don't have to stay awake to receive what God wants to give you. Even as your body rests, your spirit remains attentive. Wisdom can settle into you while you sleep, renewing your mind, calming your heart, and preparing you to wake up feeling steadier, clearer, and quietly encouraged. Let the rain remind you of this truth. God's wisdom does not rush in like a storm. It falls gently, steadily, faithfully. And tonight, it is here for you. As we move deeper into the book of Proverbs, the voice you hear is not rushed. It is patient, steady, almost like a loving guide walking beside you, pointing out the way forward one step at a time. Proverbs chapters 1 through 4 lay the foundation. Because before wisdom can shape your actions, it must first shape your heart. Proverbs begins by telling us why wisdom matters. These words are given so we may know wisdom and instruction, so we may understand what is right, what is just, and what is fair. Wisdom is not only about knowledge, it is about discernment, knowing how to respond when life presents choices that are not clearly labeled as good or bad. It gives prudence to the simple, clarity to the young, and depth to those willing to keep learning. And then we are introduced to a truth that echoes throughout the entire book. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. This kind of fear is not terror. It is reverence. It is the humble awareness that God sees further than we do, knows more than we know, and loves us enough to guide us. Without this reverence, knowledge becomes pride. But with it, even simple understanding becomes wisdom. From the very beginning, Proverbs speaks honestly about temptation. It warns us about voices that sound appealing but lead us away from life. Voices that promise quick gain, easy success, or belonging at the cost of integrity. We are cautioned not to be enticed by violence, greed, or partnerships built on wrongdoing. Not because God wants to restrict us, but because He sees where those paths end. Have you ever noticed how wrong choices rarely announce themselves as destructive at first? They often come disguised as opportunity, as excitement, as something everyone else seems to be doing. Proverbs reminds us that choosing those paths does not just harm others. It eventually turns back on us. What begins as gain ends in loss. What looks like freedom becomes a trap. And this is not said with anger, but with compassion, like a parent warning a child before they step into danger. Then something remarkable happens. Wisdom is personified. She calls out publicly, at the gates, in the streets, in the open places. Wisdom is not hidden or reserved for a select few. She raises her voice and invites anyone who is willing to listen. The simple, the unsure, the ones who know they do not have it all figured out. And the message is clear. Those who ignore wisdom eventually face the consequences of their own choices. But those who listen, those who turn, learn, and receive, find safety. This is an important moment to pause and ask ourselves, when wisdom tries to get my attention, do I listen? Or do I brush it aside? Do I slow down long enough to hear God's correction? Or do I wait until circumstances force me to? Proverbs does not shame us for past mistakes, but it does urge us not to ignore the gentle warnings we are given today. As we move into Proverbs chapter 3, the tone becomes even more intimate. Like a father speaking directly to a child. My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commands. Notice where the instruction is meant to live, not just in the mind, but in the heart. We are told that wisdom brings length of days, peace, and stability, that mercy and truth should be bound around our necks and written on the tablets of our hearts. In other words, wisdom is not something we visit occasionally. It is something we carry with us. Then comes one of the most well-known and beloved passages. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. This verse speaks directly to the tension many of us feel. We want control. We want clarity. We want to understand every step before we take it. But Proverbs gently invites us to release that burden, to acknowledge God in all our ways, and trust that He will direct our paths. Ask yourself honestly, where am I leaning on my own understanding right now? What would it look like to trust God fully in that area? Trust does not mean we stop thinking. It means we stop assuming we see the whole picture. Proverbs goes on to remind us not to be wise in our own eyes, but to fear the Lord and turn away from evil. This kind of humility brings healing, not only to the soul, but even to the body. Wisdom is described as health to the flesh and strength to the bones. Peace, when rooted in truth, reaches deeper than emotions. Then wisdom is compared to riches, but only to show how much greater it is. We are told that wisdom is more profitable than silver, more valuable than gold, and more precious than rubies. Everything we might desire cannot compare to her. Why? Because wisdom does something money cannot do. It brings peace. One of the most tender promises in these chapters is this: when you lie down, you will not be afraid. Yes, you will lie down, and your sleep will be sweet. This is not poetic exaggeration. It is spiritual truth. When our lives are aligned with God's wisdom, fear loosens its grip. Anxiety softens. Rest becomes possible. Not because life is perfect, but because our trust is rooted in something deeper than circumstances. Proverbs then turns our attention inward. Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life. Everything flows from the heart. Our words, our reactions, our decisions. Guarding the heart does not mean closing ourselves off. It means being intentional about what we allow to shape us. So ask yourself, what voices are you listening to most? What influences are quietly forming your thoughts, your fears, your hopes? Wisdom urges us to stay on the straight path, to look forward, not to the right or to the left, to remove our feet from evil, not casually, but decisively. This is not about perfection. It is about direction. Proverbs chapters 1 through 4 form a clear message. Wisdom begins with reverence. It grows through humility. It protects through discernment. And it brings peace to those who treasure it. These chapters remind us that wisdom is not loud, but it is persistent. It does not force itself upon us, but it always invites. And when we choose to listen, even imperfectly, even slowly, it reshapes our lives from the inside out. So as you rest, let these truths settle gently into your heart, not as pressure, not as obligation, but as an invitation to walk wisely, to trust more deeply, and to rest, knowing that the God who gives wisdom is also the God who watches over you tonight. As we continue through Proverbs chapters 5 through 9, the tone becomes deeply personal, almost intimate. It feels less like a lecture and more like a heartfelt conversation. A wise voice is speaking, not to condemn, but to protect. These chapters are about discernment, about purity of heart, and about the reality that every life is shaped by the paths we choose. Often quietly, one decision at a time. Again and again, Proverbs warns us about temptation, especially sexual temptation and moral compromise, not because desire itself is evil, but because unchecked desire has the power to lead us away from who we are meant to be. The words are honest, direct, sometimes uncomfortable, but they are rooted in love. We are reminded that temptation often begins sweetly. It promises pleasure without consequence. It whispers that no one will know, that this choice won't matter in the long run. But Proverbs pulls back the curtain and shows us the end of that road. What begins with sweetness often ends in bitterness. What feels exciting in the moment can quietly erode trust, peace, and integrity over time. Take a moment to reflect. How many regrets in life begin with the thought, just this once? How often do small compromises grow into heavy burdens? Proverbs does not simply tell us what to avoid. It shows us why distance matters. It urges us to stay far from destructive choices, not to test our strength, but to honor our vulnerability. Wisdom understands something we often forget. Willpower alone is not enough. Boundaries are an act of wisdom, not weakness. These chapters encourage discipline, not harsh self-control, but intentional living. Discipline that says, I value my future more than this moment. Discretion that chooses clarity over confusion, distance over regret. Then the text widens its lens. Proverbs does not only speak about specific temptations, it reveals a deeper truth. Life offers us two paths. Again and again, we see the contrast between wisdom and foolishness. One path leads toward life, stability, and peace. The other leads toward chaos, loss, and regret. Wisdom is described as a guide, someone who walks beside you, not ahead of you shouting commands, but close enough to whisper when you are about to step in the wrong direction. She protects, she instructs, she preserves. Foolishness, on the other hand, is loud but shallow. It promises freedom but delivers bondage. It speaks confidently but without foresight. It urges immediate satisfaction without regard for tomorrow. Ask yourself gently, which voice do I tend to listen to when I am tired? Lonely, stressed, or discouraged? Do I slow down to hear wisdom, or do I rush toward whatever numbs the moment? In Proverbs chapters 8 and 9, wisdom is fully personified. She is no longer quiet or hidden. She stands at the crossroads, at the gates of the city, calling out openly to everyone. Her invitation is not exclusive. It is not reserved for the educated, the religious, or the morally strong. She calls to the simple, to those who know they need guidance, to anyone willing to listen. Wisdom offers life, favor, understanding. She speaks truth without deception. Her words are righteous, clear, and trustworthy. She tells us plainly that loving wisdom is loving life itself. Then comes one of the most striking images in all of Proverbs. Wisdom builds her house. She carves out 7 pillars. She prepares a feast, and she sends out an invitation. This is not the image of a distant, unreachable virtue. This is wisdom as hospitality, wisdom as provision, wisdom as a home, stable, intentional, well-built. The 7 pillars suggest completeness, strength, and order. Nothing is rushed, nothing is missing. Wisdom invites the simple to come in, to eat, to learn, to leave foolishness behind and walk in understanding. This is not a message of shame. It is a message of transformation, an invitation to become someone new. But Proverbs is honest enough to show us the other voice as well. Foolishness also calls out. She too has an invitation, but hers is deceptive. She offers stolen water, secret pleasures, shortcuts that seem harmless. Her words sound exciting, even comforting. But the truth is hidden beneath the surface. Those who follow her do not realize where they are going until it is too late. Her path leads quietly, but surely, toward destruction. This contrast is intentional. Wisdom and foolishness both call to us. Both speak in familiar places. Both offer something that feels appealing. The difference is not in how loudly they speak, but in where they lead. Proverbs chapter 9 leaves us with a powerful reminder. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Reverence is the doorway, not fear of punishment, but awe, respect, a recognition that God's design for life is wiser than our impulses, that His boundaries are not meant to limit joy, but to protect it. If you are listening tonight and you feel the weight of past mistakes, hear this clearly. Proverbs is not written to condemn you. It is written to guide you forward. Wisdom does not ask where you have been. She asks where you are willing to go next. Perhaps you are at a crossroads right now, a decision no one else sees, a temptation you have been justifying, a path you know is not leading toward peace. This is where wisdom speaks most clearly. She does not rush you. She does not shame you. She invites you to choose life. Proverbs chapters 5 through 9 remind us that purity is not about perfection. It is about direction. Discernment is not about suspicion. It is about clarity. And wisdom is not about intelligence. It is about humility. So as you rest, let these truths settle gently into your heart. Let wisdom walk beside you. Let discernment guard you. And remember, every step you take toward wisdom is a step toward life, peace, and lasting joy. As we enter Proverbs chapters 10 through 20, the rhythm of the book begins to change. Instead of long explanations, we are given short, steady truths, like gentle reminders scattered throughout daily life. These chapters speak to ordinary moments, how we speak, how we work, how we treat others, how we respond when no one is watching. This is wisdom for everyday living. Again and again, Proverbs places two paths side by side: the righteous and the wicked, the wise and the foolish, the diligent and the lazy. These contrasts are not meant to divide people, but to help us recognize patterns. Because over time, patterns shape lives. One of the clearest messages in these chapters is this: integrity brings security. When a person walks honestly, they walk without fear. There is nothing to hide, nothing to defend, nothing to constantly manage. Integrity creates a quiet confidence, a sense of inner stability that does not depend on circumstances. Dishonesty, on the other hand, may seem profitable for a moment, but it always carries a hidden cost. Proverbs tells us that ill-gotten gain does not last. Lies eventually surface. Shortcuts eventually collapse. What looks like success without effort often leads to loss without warning. This invites an honest question. Am I choosing what is easy or what is right? Do my private choices align with the life I say I want? Proverbs also spends a great deal of time teaching us about our words, because words are not neutral. They build or they break. They heal or they wound. A gentle answer can turn away anger. Harsh words stir up conflict. The wise learn restraint. They do not feel the need to speak every thought that crosses their mind. In a world where everyone is encouraged to express everything instantly, Proverbs offers a different wisdom. Silence can be strength. Listening can be power. A restrained tongue protects not only others, but our own souls. Think about the last conflict you experienced. Did it escalate because of what was said, or how it was said? What might have changed if gentleness had led the conversation? Truthful speech is emphasized again and again. Lying lips may seem small, but they erode trust over time. And trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. Wisdom understands that honesty is not just about facts. It is about faithfulness, being dependable, being consistent, being someone others feel safe with. These chapters also speak clearly about work and diligence. Proverbs honors effort, not hustle for the sake of pride, but faithful labor done with care. The diligent person plans, prepares, and perseveres. Over time, this leads to stability. Not always wealth, but provision. Not always recognition, but peace. Laziness, by contrast, is not portrayed as rest. It is avoidance, delay, excuses. Proverbs describes the lazy person as always promising action later, while opportunities quietly pass by. Lack does not arrive suddenly. It creeps in slowly. So ask yourself gently, where am I being faithful with what is in front of me? And where might I be postponing responsibility that God is inviting me to face? Another strong theme in these chapters is humility. Pride is consistently shown as dangerous. Not because confidence is wrong, but because pride blinds. Pride refuses correction. Pride assumes it already knows. And Proverbs tells us plainly, pride goes before destruction. Humility, on the other hand, opens the door to learning. A wise person welcomes correction, not because it feels good, but because it leads to growth. Correction is not rejection, it is direction. So reflect honestly. How do you respond when someone challenges you? Do you become defensive or curious? Do you dismiss correction or consider what it might be teaching you? Proverbs teaches that fools despise instruction. They see correction as an insult, but the wise see it as a gift. Wisdom grows where humility lives. Throughout these chapters, we are reminded again and again that God sees the heart. He is not impressed by outward appearances alone. He weighs motives. He notices mercy. He honors justice. Righteous living is not about public image. It is about private faithfulness. Justice and compassion are deeply connected in Proverbs. We are warned not to exploit others, not to ignore the poor, not to take advantage of weakness. God cares about how power is used, how words affect others, how decisions ripple outward. There is a quiet reassurance woven through these chapters as well. The righteous may face trouble, but they are not abandoned. Storms come to everyone, but wisdom provides a foundation that remains steady even when circumstances shake. Proverbs also addresses relationships, friendships, families, communities. It reminds us that gossip destroys trust, that uncontrolled anger creates wounds, that choosing wise companions shapes our future. Walk with the wise, we are told, and you will become wise. Who we surround ourselves with matters, whose voices influence us matters, whose values we absorb slowly, subtly matters. As these chapters unfold, they offer no dramatic promises. Instead, they offer something more enduring, a way of life that leads to peace, a life marked by honesty, patience, diligence, humility, and reverence for God. This kind of wisdom does not demand perfection. It invites consistency. Small, faithful choices made day after day. Words chosen carefully. Work done honestly. Hearts kept open to correction. Lives aligned with truth. So as you listen, let these proverbs settle into your spirit, not as rules to memorize, but as principles to live by. Let them guide your speech, shape your work, steady your relationships, because wisdom, practiced daily, becomes a quiet strength. And over time, that strength becomes a life well lived. As we come to the final section of Proverbs, chapters 21 through 31, the wisdom becomes deeper, quieter, and more reflective. It feels as though the book is no longer only teaching us how to live, but who we are becoming. These chapters speak about character, about reverence, about the kind of life that leaves a lasting imprint, not only on ourselves, but on everyone around us. One of the central truths repeated here is simple, yet searching. God weighs the heart, not appearances, not words alone, not outward religious acts. God looks beneath the surface, to motives, intentions, inner alignment. Proverbs tells us clearly that righteousness and justice matter more to God than empty sacrifice. In other words, faith that does not shape our behavior is incomplete. This challenges us gently, but honestly. Do my values show up in how I treat others? Does my faith shape my decisions when it costs me something? Proverbs reminds us that doing what is right, showing fairness, practicing mercy, walking in integrity, is not secondary to spirituality. It is spirituality. True reverence for God expresses itself in how we live. These chapters also return again and again to the importance of self-control. We are encouraged to govern our desires, restrain our anger, guard our words. A person who rules their own spirit, Proverbs says, is stronger than one who conquers a city. This is not the kind of strength that impresses crowds. It is the kind that builds peace. Consider this. How often do problems escalate because a moment of restraint was missing? How many regrets could be avoided by a pause, a breath, a gentle response? Proverbs speaks often about the tongue, because words reveal the heart. Careless speech can destroy trust. Harsh words can wound deeply, but a guarded tongue preserves life. Wisdom teaches us that not every truth needs to be spoken immediately, and not every emotion needs to be expressed without reflection. Another strong theme throughout this section is wise counsel. We are reminded that plans succeed when guided by wisdom, and fail when driven by pride alone. Seeking counsel is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of humility. It acknowledges that we do not see everything clearly on our own. Ask yourself, when facing decisions, do I seek wisdom or just confirmation of what I already want? Proverbs also emphasizes careful planning, not anxious control, but thoughtful preparation. We are encouraged to work diligently, plan responsibly, and act with foresight, while still recognizing that ultimate outcomes rest in God's hands. This balance between responsibility and trust runs throughout these chapters. Alongside wisdom and self-control, Proverbs places great importance on compassion for the poor and vulnerable. We are warned not to exploit weakness, not to ignore injustice, not to harden our hearts against suffering. God identifies himself with the oppressed. To show mercy is to honor him. This is a sobering reminder in a world that often measures success by accumulation. Proverbs offers a different measure: generosity, fairness, kindness, the willingness to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Closely tied to this is the call to restraint from envy and revenge. Proverbs consistently tells us not to repay evil with evil, not to envy those who prosper unjustly, not to take vengeance into our own hands. Why? Because envy corrodes the soul, and revenge prolongs pain. Instead, we are invited to trust that God sees, God knows, and God will bring justice in his time. Letting go of resentment is not denial, it is freedom. As we move into Proverbs chapter 30, the tone becomes especially reflective. The writer acknowledges human limitation openly. There is humility here, an honest confession that we do not fully understand the ways of God. And in that humility, we find wisdom. We are reminded that every word of God is pure, trustworthy, refining, protective. And then comes a prayer that feels deeply human and deeply wise, a request for neither poverty nor riches, but daily provision. Enough. This prayer speaks powerfully to modern life. Not excess that leads to pride, not lack that leads to desperation, but balance. So pause and reflect. How often do we chase more, only to discover it costs us peace? How often do we fear not having enough, even when God has already provided? Proverbs 30 invites us to rest in sufficiency, to trust that what God provides, when received with gratitude, is enough. Finally, Proverbs chapter 31 brings the book to a close with two powerful portraits: leadership rooted in justice, and character rooted in reverence. First, there is counsel given to leaders. Kings and those in authority are warned against corruption, against abusing power, against neglecting the afflicted. Leadership, Proverbs teaches, is not about self-indulgence. It is about responsibility, speaking for those without a voice, defending the poor and the vulnerable, using influence to uphold justice. This wisdom extends beyond political leadership. It speaks to anyone who holds influence, in families, in workplaces, in communities. Power is always meant to serve, not exploit. Then comes one of the most well-known passages in all of Proverbs: the portrait of the virtuous woman. She is described not by appearance, but by character. She is diligent, wise, generous, strong. She works willingly, plans wisely, gives freely. She cares for her household and extends her hands to the needy. She speaks with wisdom and kindness. She is not driven by fear, because her life is anchored in reverence for God. This passage is not meant to burden or idealize unrealistically. It is a celebration of godly character, of faith expressed through action. It shows us that a life lived with wisdom blesses not only the individual, but everyone connected to them. And Proverbs closes with this reminder: charm is deceptive, beauty is fleeting, but a person who fears the Lord is worthy of praise. This is where the entire book leads us. Not to perfection, not to performance, but to reverence. Reverence that shapes our choices, humility that keeps us teachable, justice that guides our actions, and character that reflects God's wisdom in everyday life. As you rest with these final chapters, let them settle gently into your heart. Let them remind you that wisdom is not only something we learn, it is something we become. A life rooted in reverence will bear fruit in its season, and that fruit will bless far more than we realize. Beloved, as we come to the close of this time together, pause for just a moment and take a gentle breath. You have listened to the wisdom of Proverbs. Words that were never meant to rush past your ears, but to settle quietly and dwell richly within your heart. These are not just teachings for the mind. They are seeds for the soul. Like rain falling softly on the earth, God's truth does not force its way in. It comes gently, patiently, drop by drop. And yet, over time, it changes everything it touches. Dry ground begins to soften. Hidden roots are nourished. New life becomes possible beneath the surface, even when nothing seems to be happening at first. That is how wisdom works in us. Tonight, you may not remember every proverb you heard. You may not recall every word. And that is okay. Wisdom does not depend on memory alone. It seeps in quietly. It shapes your thoughts when you least expect it. It steadies your heart in moments when you would normally feel anxious. It guides your choices in ways you may only notice later. As the sound of rain continues, let it remind you of this truth. God's word is still at work in you, even now, washing, cleansing, renewing, restoring what has been worn down by stress, by worry, by the weight of daily life. You do not need to strive tonight. You do not need to figure everything out. You are allowed to rest. Proverbs reminds us that wisdom brings peace, and peace prepares us for rest. So allow yourself to settle into God's protection. Let your body relax. Let your mind release what it has been holding on to. Trust that the God who gives wisdom is also the God who watches over you as you sleep. And as you rest, I invite you to gently reflect. Was there a proverb that stood out to you tonight? A phrase that lingered in your heart? A truth that felt especially personal, almost as if it was meant just for you? If so, hold on to it. You don't need to analyze it. Simply let it stay with you. Turn it into a quiet prayer. Speak it back to God in your own words. Ask Him to plant it deeply within you, to shape your thoughts, your decisions, and your steps in the days ahead. This is how wisdom becomes part of us, not through effort, but through invitation, not through pressure, but through presence. And remember, you are always welcome to return. Let this not be a one-time moment, but a place you revisit, a sanctuary you come back to when your spirit feels crowded, when your mind feels restless, or when you simply need to be reminded of what truly matters. Each time you return to Proverbs, something new will meet you there. A verse that speaks differently than before. A truth that arrives at just the right moment. Over time, these words will saturate your spirit, quietly shaping a life rooted in wisdom, peace, and trust. So tonight, rest knowing this. You are not alone. You are held. You are guided, and you are deeply loved. May peace settle over your heart. May rest come easily to your body. May God's wisdom continue to guard your thoughts and light your path. In Jesus' name, may you sleep in peace and wake renewed. Good night.